Hello. Hello. I think the mic is working.
They can go here, but then take it comes over. Yeah, we can hear everybody talking.
Yeah. Okay, good.
I'm just going to put my coffee up there. I'm just going to set my coffee up here.
Sure. Well, why don't you, wherever you're comfortable sitting, and do you need anything else with water?
No, see where I need.
Okay.
Oh, don't take this. That's Ohio Medicine Policy? Yes. You did actually a great job.
Thank you. I did a clemency hearing on Monday, so that was.
We have Governor grants that we use.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
So, people here. Hi, everybody.
Okay, I can't be in.
You can share the microphone. Thank you all for coming. My name is Emily Steinmetz, and I teach at Antioch College. I teach cultural anthropology. Currently on our campus, we are hosting a national traveling exhibition called States of Incarceration, and it's on display at the Herndon Gallery, which is over in South Hall. If any of you haven't been there, it's open to the public. And while we're hosting this exhibition, we are tasked. So the exhibition is coordinated by the New School in New York City, by their Humanities Action Lab. And so while we host the exhibition, one of our jobs on campus is to create public dialogues around issues relating to mass incarceration. The Antioch College contribution to that exhibit is focused on life sentences, and one of the issues that's come up again and again is the issue or the problem of parole, and parole in Ohio specifically, because we're in Ohio here, and our project kind of looked at kind of the local realities of life sentencing. And so today we're hosting this panel of lovely people here to come and talk about parole and possibly parole reform initiatives in Ohio that are going on. And so I just want to introduce our panelists. I mean, this is a small group, so I think we can open it up for, like, if you have questions or if there's things you want to talk about, I'm sure we'll have plenty of time for that. But our panelists are Angela Bryant, who teaches at Ohio State University and teaches Inside Out classes at which prison?
SCI Lancaster.
Chris, I don't know your last name.
Howard.
Chris Howard, who has been through the parole process and share some of his experiences. Loretta, did you want to add something?
No.
Inside Out alumni.
Oh, Inside Out, right, Inside Out alum. Lorenzo, I don't know your last name, sorry. And I know you guys, Chris and Lorenzo. So Lorenzo's also been through the parole process in Ohio and is an Inside Out alum as well. Tiffany Smith, who's an attorney at the Ohio Justice and Policy Center, and hopefully can speak a little bit on this panel to the issues particularly affecting women. And James Cronenberger, who I just had the pleasure of meeting, but I've kind of been introduced to via email, who is working on a reform proposal that will be submitted to the Ohio General Assembly. So we're hoping James can talk a little bit about that. So I would like to invite each of you to maybe just introduce maybe the things you're most interested in talking about today. I think at some point we'll open it up. I think there are a couple things we definitely should talk about, which are like the old law, new law distinctions in Ohio and how that affects people differently. But other than that, I think we should then just open it up to questions. But who would like to start? Anyone wants to start?
I will. My name is Chris Howard, and I'm kind of going to give you some insight from the other end of the spectrum. We have people who are doing life sentences who are fighting for their lives, fighting to get out of prison. And I, on the other hand, have been given that opportunity multiple times. I'm a white male, I'm a property offender, and I'm someone that they can let out, and the public scrutiny just doesn't come with it. And so for me, the parole process has been, it's obviously not fair. Fair is not, I'll not use that word. It's a crazy system that overwhelmingly keeps people, minorities, keeps people with life sentences, with murder convictions in prison. People who can be an asset to their society, who can be productive members of their community. And I know hundreds of them. I've met hundreds of them. And these individuals can make a difference in not only their communities, but maybe they could be the work they do could be an inspiration for others. It has been for me. I'm sitting here today as a free man, I'm on parole. But whether or not, I obviously, I just did 19 years, and that's quite a stretch. I got out February 1st, so it's been a few short months. But in my case, this is my 12th term of incarceration. And the parole board lady said it herself. She said, what's any different this time than the other 11 previous terms? And I said, well, I'm 47 years old now, so which is really the only difference. But they gave me a parole, and we were discussing earlier my supervision stipulations while on parole, and I'm a high-risk offender, doesn't get any higher than me, and I now only report once every 3 months. Because in their eyes, they see someone who, if he messes up, he's going to break into something, he's going to steal something, right? But you have individuals, like I said, who are, I can sit here and rip off several names off the top of my head, and I'm sure there are hundreds of others that I don't know where there are. To keep it simple, these individuals deserve to be released. Ohio uses, for those of you who are not familiar with the parole system, they have certain standards they have to meet before they can let them out. And one of them is something that's never going to change. That's the nature of the offense. You kill someone in Ohio, the nature of that offense is never ever going to change. But they continue to use this against these individuals. You can't unkill someone, right? I mean, I'm not sure what they're looking for. I'm not sure what that standard entails, because it's just something that can't be undone. And in my situation, don't get me wrong, I'm glad I'm free. I'm not asking to be returned free, but simply put, I'm not the most worthy candidate, so there are way more worthy individuals. But I'm simply not one. So from my perspective, I've been given opportunities that they'll never see. These individuals are so distraught, they don't even go to the parole board anymore. That's a guaranteed block. That's guaranteed time. They're saying, we're tired of y'all playing with our lives. Give us the time. These individuals had lost all hope in a failed system. We can all agree that it's a failed system. But I sit here today thankful that I have an opportunity. But I'm saddened by a system that just doesn't give worthy individuals the opportunity. I'm not suggesting that everybody is worthy. Everybody who has a life sentence is worthy. Some people don't value human life, but there are individuals who they've been huge for me personally, and they're all lifers, each and every one of them. To put yourself in their shoes, how do you make an individual? How do you make an individual who 30 years, who has no disciplinary consequences, who has a bachelor's degree, who not only walks the walk, talks the talk, he walks the walk, right? How do you tell him no after 30 years? He made a terrible mistake, but these individuals, they deserve a chance. I'm here now for everyone. So from my perspective, something's got to change. They sensationalize murder convictions. I'm not trying to undermine the act of killing someone. It's a terrible act. There is no worse act to be committed, right? So, from my perspective, I mean, the majority of these individuals wish that they would just put them down like a lame dog, you know? And I've heard that on multiple occasions. Why do they continue forward with their lives, you know? And it's easy to see how these guys are sober, you know? I won't use his name, but one individual, he's been to the parole board 8 times and has never had a conduct report. He's did over 35 years, has a bachelor's degree, is involved in everything you could ever do, and spends his own money on inmate groups, organizing. He needs to be on the street. So, I'll leave it at that.
I want to speak on lifers because I was a lifer. I got sentenced to 15 years of life when I was 18 years old for a crime I didn't commit, but that's besides the point. I saw the parole board 5 times before I was eventually released. I have 4 co-defendants who are all still incarcerated, and many of them had better institutional records than me, better education than me, and they're still getting denied parole. I've been out for 3 years. I haven't been in any trouble. I try to lead a life that is righteous, and not only because I don't want to go back to prison, but because that's the person I am. I'm not the same person I was when I was 18 years old. I was a criminal. I didn't commit the crime, but I belong in prison. And so many people are going up for parole, and they don't have any hope because, like he said, all they tell you is due to the serious nature of the crime. That's the reason it's stamped, due to the serious nature of the crime. You have no other explanation of what do I need to do to get out? What do I need to change? And what they don't tell you is in a lot of cases, which I found out after I was eventually released, was they look at your community support, they look at your jobs available. Well, after being locked up for so many years, 30, 35, 40 years, you don't have any more community support. Your family members have died, your friends have gone, lived their own, got married, they have kids. They don't have time for you. I mean, that's just the way life is. And I don't think it's right to tell somebody due to the serious nature of the crime. We don't feel like it's in the best public interest of society for us to release you. Well, the crime's never going to change. If you're a dangerous person 25 years from now, you're going to be a dangerous, probably even more dangerous person 40 years from now, because what are you going to do when you get out? I mean, you have no community support. Nobody's willing to give you a job because you have no job history. You have 0 credit. And like he said, a lot of people, and most of the lifers in prison are the ones that keep people out of trouble because they've learned their lesson. They've been locked up for so long. They've matured. They no longer desire to be a criminal. And it's just, they're the ones that run the program in prisons. They mediate problems between other prisoners. Like, these people are leaders. And out in society, I know so many people out in society who are lifers who did a long time, who are leaders in the community. They run drug rehab programs. They run their own nonprofit organizations helping underprivileged youth. I mean, it's ridiculous to say that due to the serious nature of the crime, we're not letting you go without giving you hope for the future. And I never got to the point where I felt like I wasn't gonna go to the parole board, and just let them do what they wanted to do. Because I feel like if you truly changed, then nothing anybody else can say to you is gonna change that mindset. Whether it's 25 years, 30 years, 40 years, a changed person is a changed person. I just think something needs to be done. All 4 of my co-defendants, they won't be eligible for parole until after I'm already off parole. That's ridiculous. 2 of my co-defendants were juveniles, 15 and 17 years old when they were convicted. And in a lot of cases, there's really not a lot of evidence to convict some of these people, but the parole board doesn't play jury. That's what they say. We don't play judge and jury. We're here to determine whether you're suitable for release to society. But these are just everyday individuals like us. So if they're in a bad mood and you go up in front of them and they had a bad day, they're not going to let you out. It's just the way it is. And I think there needs to be more of a set standard for why you're releasing somebody and why you're not releasing somebody.
So on that, I'd like to give you a little background. In the late 80s, early 90s, when Governor Celeste, when he was the governor of Ohio, parole hearings, the expectation was if you were continued, if you were denied parole, you would be given 2 to 3 years, and you'd be given the expectations of what you were supposed to do in order to be able to get out. After Governor Celeste, we had Governor Voinovich, whose family had a construction business that built prisons and jails. And he, under him, he's changed the laws. So continuation by the parole board could be up to 15 years. They can actually do it to the max if you have a maximum sentence. And they changed it to this, what they do now. So this is a parole board decision. Not a lot written on there. There's some months, but like they said, you just check this box. There's a substantial reason to believe that due to the serious nature of the crime, the release of the inmate into society would create undue risk to public safety, or that due to the serious nature of the crime, the release of the inmate would not further the interest of justice or be consistent with the welfare and security of society. They don't have to say anything. They just mark that box. That doesn't give you any information. I mean, they're called the Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, but they're not necessarily believing in, I guess, the rehabilitation portion of things. Under the law, they have to provide meaningful consideration. However, and there's 18 different factors they need to consider. They're not weighted, and because this is what they provide, we have no idea what they considered, if they considered anything at all. When the way the parole process works is the first hearing is called the institutional hearing, and it is the prisoner and the parole board only. So even if you have an attorney, your attorney's not permitted to be there. And anything that is provided by victims or the prosecutor or the judge or the prison is not available for either the prisoner or the attorney. So you have no idea what information they're relying on. There's a Supreme Court case, Keith, that said if the parole board relies on false information, they have to remedy that, they have to fix that. But we have no idea if they're relying on false information because we don't know what they're relying on. This is the only, maybe it's not the only, so I shouldn't say that. But our government was built on the notion that no one arm of government has 100% total control. There's oversight by other arms of the government, even the president, supposedly. So, sorry, not going there. But my point is, nobody has oversight to the parole board. They do what they want, they make their own rules, they do everything in secrecy, and there's no appealability. There's no way to fight that. I have clients so most of my clients are women. My project is trying to get women released from prison who are incarcerated for the deaths of their abuser. So these women have been in prison for, some of them, almost 30 years. And they keep getting denied, Recently, we had a woman, we also trained the parole board and DRC on domestic violence, hoping that would make a difference. However, after that, one of the parole board members asked my woman if she takes any responsibility for the abuse. And then they decided
After training this?
yeah. And then they decided that her institutional record was so good, she must be manipulating the system. So she's been in 28 years and they flopped her for 5. They denied her, they continued her, sorry. So there needs to be, they also apparently, they apparently have this policy that the first time you're up, you're automatically continued. You're automatically denied. So my office has filed a lawsuit along with Thompson Hine against the parole board for lack of meaningful consideration, denial of records, and this first flop policy. So we'll see what that goes. Those are basically my high points on that, I guess. And there has got to be parole reform. There has to be. So that leads into it.
I actually like what everybody had to say because that's what's in line with what we're trying to do with the proposal to our state legislators. We have a broken system. We have, I think, roughly around 50,000 locked up, maybe 3,800 sentenced before 1996, and probably close to 6,000 that has to see the parole board after that Senate Bill 2 that's doing life. And the oldest inmate to my knowledge is 50, he's been in for 54 years, and he's at Grafton. But we have people that's been on 20, 30, 40, 50 years that's losing their family members, losing support, or going to be too old to work and be more of a burden to society. I would like to read a little bit of what we're trying to get accomplished with this proposal. It was written by 2 former inmates from ORW who are very legally minded, which I'm not. But we have the 7 goals that we're trying to get accomplished through getting something like this proposed is, number 1 would be immediate relief for all old law prisoners unjustly denied parole who had no appeal process and no legal remedy in the courts. 2, establishment of an appeal process for prisoners who have met requirements for parole release, yet denied parole without just cause, which is a lot of people. Number 3, reduction in the cost of prisons in Ohio by fair and just reduction in prison population by an efficient and equal administered parole system. 4, a system of review of the functioning of the Ohio Adult Parole Board. 5, revision of the Ohio Adult Parole Board structures to ensure oversight and fair representation of the interests of the families of both victims and offenders. 6, to specify clear and equitable legal justification for parole decisions to release the offender and to limit cause for which the parole board may return a prisoner to prison with a goal towards reentry. success, and reduction in prison costs. And 7, to make available to all prisoners, regardless of the date of sentencing, release from prison and equal opportunity to release options and community control sanctions. You know, if we could get these people paroled, and there may be a handful of people that probably shouldn't be, but the majority of them should be. And just think of the money that the taxpayers who's paying for all this would save. And we have to let the people know that the state's really not paying for it, it's the taxpayers, the working class people. And if they knew where the money was going, I think they'd be pretty upset. The average cost, I believe, for an inmate right now is $28,000. I think that's about right, isn't it? And the older inmates that's been down, so on, that's got medical problems, is $70,000 and above. Just think, if you go through chemotherapy or through dialysis, over $100,000 a year. And that's costing the state money, which is costing the taxpayers money, and which the taxes keep going up. So we need to get a more transparent parole process for each individual. And, you know, like these people said, is the major offense won't change, but people do change. And the majority of the people that's been down 20, 30, 40, 50 years are not going to rip that. If they were guilty, they've lost their killer instincts. And they say around 10% are innocent, but I would believe it's a little bit more than that. And if you claim to the parole board you're innocent, they're not going to parole you. Now, we met with Andy in the last 2 years, and he said, oh, that's not true, we parole people. But if you look at the records, I haven't found one that has been paroled. But then we have a former senator sitting on the board who I sat in office 4 years ago that stated all these guys should be home. But what she's doing is bringing up tickets that's 10 years old and using that against an individual because she's making around $80-some thousand a year. You know, the parole board salary is probably close to $1 million with all parole board members minus Michael Jackson, who just got arrested for DUI for a stop for the United States worked at the governor's office. But that's all I have to say for now. And also, the instructor made some copies of our proposal that is someplace out there.
Well, just quickly, there's copies of the proposal, the legislative proposal, which is being introduced to the Ohio General Assembly when?
We're working on it. And
okay.
To bring that up, we do have legislative day on the 24th of May at 1 p.m. at the Ohio State House. You walk in the front doors, walk all the way straight down the rotunda, and we'll be at the coffee shop. Don't buy the coffee, it's not very good, but that's where we're going to be meeting that day.
Do you have legislators supporting?
We have a couple of interests, but we need a Republican. We have Adam Miller, who's really on board. Charlotte Tavares, but she's term limited. Bercia Craig, who's probably going to move up in the Senate. Andrew Brunner is very wishy-washy because he promised us 6 years ago that he was going to work on a proposal or a bill to try to combine the laws, and he's still talking about it 7 years later, and nothing's been done. So we have to get people, and we have to target the Republicans. Without them, we're not going to get anything passed, and we have to show them they're going to save all this money.
So there's copies. I mean, you're welcome. I made photocopies of it. There's donuts over there too if you want donuts, and there's cups and water. But there's copies of this over there for people, and there's also some information about a ballot initiative, which maybe we can talk about before we leave today too. Angela, would you like to say something?
Well, I'm going last, so I'm going to actually change based on what Vic said, what I am going to talk about, which is how through inside out classes, do I need
we can just point one toward you, yeah.
I think it was about 2014 and through an inside out group project that the class wanted to focus on this parole issue, right?
What's Inside Out for people who might not know?
Inside Out is a international program where half our university students, half our incarcerated students, you go through a training. In Ohio, I coordinate Inside Out for the state. We're in 13 prisons. Numerous universities participate. And I've been doing it, it's my 10th year at SCI Lancaster. And in 2014, each class in my classes, all of them are different disciplines, they all run differently. that they decide what they want to focus their kind of culminating group project on. And they wanted to look at this parole system at the time for old law offenders. And so, of course, as an educator, I had to educate myself, right? Because that's not my area of expertise, and I didn't know a lot about Ohio's system. So I actually have a lot of relationships. Relationships matter in DRC. And so I went and literally did observations of full board hearings. And then started getting down in their policy with actual parole board members. One of the interesting things at the time actually wasn't just that my class wanted to focus on this, but the warden at the time, who was a very innovative, risk-taking warden, those are hard to come by. She has since left, and it's very different. And she was actually frustrated seeing men in her prison go in front of these institutional hearings that you heard them speak of, because most people are denied at the institutional level. They never make it to the next pass, right? And seeing men that she believed are restored citizens getting denied at that level. And so she wanted us to actually focus on this too and figure out what was going on. We had some luck implementing actually some findings from group projects. So in those phone calls that I had with at the time some of the parole board members, and of course they turned over since then too, I didn't know the history too of why the parole board was created, and they shared with me that it was a compromise at the time when they created this monster, which was the legislation was recommending that victims, essentially victims' families and victims, would have the right of denial or parole, meaning that if I'm a victim of a serious crime, right, that if you were coming up, if Chris was coming up for parole, that I would be able to say, no, you're not getting out, versus some kind of what they called at the time middle ground, right? People who were trained in certain areas and could look at all of these different factors instead of the direct victim and victim's family. So that was a piece of information I didn't know, because I could tell just from my limited experience that the whole process was very much geared towards victims' families. And so I kept asking different questions until I got to this piece where I was like, oh, okay, so now even when things aren't in policy, if you understand the history of how they come to be, you can see why they end up in this slanted space. I'll tell you a couple other things that I think are really important for people to understand. Full board hearings, even though many people don't make it to that stage, are public. However, like a lot of things in our criminal justice system, they make it really challenging to be in the space. Meaning, even though there's supposed to be this public hearing, they want to know why you're there, kind of what you're representing. And in my case, they knew exactly what I was doing. And they made me sit. In fact, twice I had, there's security office, police officers there. And twice the police asked me to move because I kept moving to the offender side because nobody's over there. Okay, and on the other side, you have, the prosecutor from the county who isn't the prosecutor who prosecuted the case, right? This is 30 years removed. So they're just going off of the file that they have. You have OVS, which is Ohio Victim Services folks who represent the victims and their families. You also have a lot of kind of people who work in the system who are there for all sorts of reasons. Continuing ed, they're parole officers. But it's like, if this was the space, you would have like these seats all full. And then on the offender side, rarely in my observations were there family members there. And if there were, there'd be like 2 or 3 of them to testify. And at this point, they had started providing public defenders at the full board hearing only. And so it was that person and these 2 or 3 family members. So it was like completely skewed physically. And it is very noticeable, like it's palpable in the room too, actually. And so even when I would try to shift and say, well, I'm not like affiliated with any of this, I'm just here to observe, so why can't I, you saw too, I don't really like to be in tight spaces. They didn't want that, okay? So The full board hearing, I did learn a lot. I have since, we focused on this issue a lot, and actually I have a think tank now at SCI who is trying to bring an actual project to fruition around parole. And we decided that actually some of what we're getting bogged down in terms of old law, new law is harmful to what we want to see achieved, which is reform for both. Because if you look at the numbers, they're pretty equal in terms of who goes in front of the board. And it makes up 15%, for instance, of the 50,000 folks that you talked about. So if you look, just based on the most recent numbers, the pre-SB2 folks, which are people since before 96, where they were given, like Lorenzo was, you're given a plea bargain of 15 to life, told you're getting out at 15 years, right? Whereas the new law went into effect after that. And so you had 4,144 people under old law, and you have 3,605 people under new law. Take those two numbers together, and that's 7,749 people. That's 15% of our entire population stuck through this release mechanism, right? So one of the things we're looking at, because I've had conversations again with parole board members that have since shifted with the drama of the parole board member getting arrested for bribery, attempted bribery of a police official. I am wondering, by the way, since OJPC has filed a lawsuit, if you're going to do some litigation around every case that he was on, because there's been some folks now filing for clemency that he was the major naysayer of their release, given what happened with that case. And they hear this a lot. They're hearing this a lot, right? They're hearing this like they're not letting old law folks out. And the last conversation I had before the current chair moved to now he's in legal services, I like to talk about these criminal justice systems that remind me a lot of what the Catholic Church did in the heyday of sexual abuse, right? They move folks to different parts. They don't ever really fix the problem. If it's a problem person or a problem system, they just move them around. They do the same thing in the prison system too. And the chair that was the most recent chair said, one of the things that would be interesting is instead of just story after story of this being the case, are we far enough, and with statistical tools we can do this, from the 96 to be able to say, who is serving more time?
Oh,
and so that's one of the things that, because here's the other gateway. In order to do any research for DRC, you have to do something that meets their needs to get through their IRB process. Okay, so it's got to be something that meets their needs. It can't just be, I want to research this because it's a great thing to research. You somehow have to meet their needs. So that's something that they want statistical information on. And then the other thing we're looking at is kind of a qualitative piece, which is how they're defining what they call this suitability for release, right? Which you heard a lot of folks talk about. And I will tell you, there's also a policy for DRC that people in prison cannot directly participate in research. And here's great, we subjugate, by the way, people to prison to all kinds of research. And I say we, because I'm part of that culture that does that. And we want them, and the prison kind of co-ops it, right? DRC co-ops with University of Cincinnati all the time to do all this research, and supposedly it's voluntary, right? But if you're being told you get pizza in prison, you're probably going to go to that meeting, right, in terms of participation. But yet, if you're in prison, you cannot conduct any research yourself. But I can subject you to as many studies as I want. So we have formed this advisory group, is what we're positioning it as. Most of the men in my group are under this system. They are served a long period of time. They are restored citizens. I would move them in my neighborhood tomorrow. And they're very interested in providing what they can to help people present legislation, because we have come to the conclusion that you need legislative changes. And we even presented, James, this piece on Tuesday, and we'd like to have more conversations. We'd like your group to come out, because there's some things that we don't necessarily agree with, or we do, or we want to be able to support it in a way, kind of like what they're doing with the ballot initiative. So we get this to how do we get the people to be able to testify in support of the real change that's needed in this system. Now, I will say this too, and even though this is being recorded and I plan to show it to my think tank, I make no secrets of this, even though I have all of these great relationships. I am an abolitionist of a lot of things, and one of them is the parole system. And I will say the system, all of them are designed to fail. So you can't look at, like, when I think of reform, it kind of gives me this, ugh, because when you tinker with this system, it does nothing. Look at what Gary Moore has even been trying to do, and I'm going to give him some props for a second, even though I'm not completely on the same page with the Gary Moore. Everything they try to do, this is the back end of the system, right? And so any tinkering they even try to do, he's shut down prisons, you know, he has, their numbers are as high as they've ever been. And yes, you got to affect the front end in terms of who's getting into the gateway, right? But at the same time, when you have a system of parole, you've heard these two men share their stories, and I've known Lorenzo longer than I've known Chris. But you know, like when Chris told me this about how he was going on inactive status right away, I'm like, this is what I'm talking about. This system is so corrupt. A man who has done nothing, okay, didn't even do the crime he was locked up for 23 years for, just had to appeal the parole board to see his own brother, who's one of his co-defendants. That took 3 years to get through. Doesn't get to go to the status Chris is on within 2 months until, what, a year or 18 months of good behavior in the community. And here, and I'm not like trying to throw you under the bus or anything, but like here's somebody who's like a recidivator, right? Like somebody who has continuously recidivated and ended up, you said since 85, you've served he has been in the community 2 calendar years since 85. 12 members?
Even on the bill.
Yeah. So he cannot get off parole early. There is no, trust me, we've been using, kind of seeing what is possible within the system for folks. I testified at Lorenzo's full board hearing, and that was an interesting, I had students there doing field notes as part of our work too. An interesting experience as well in terms of the questions that they're asking and those sorts of things. Lorenzo is, by the way, somebody who has from the beginning claimed his innocence, even at a parole, and did get released. But you heard him say his 4 co-defendants are still in prison. But a lot came up at the full board hearing about the Wrongful Conviction Project, who got involved in one of his co-defendants' cases, and kind of the process in which they looked at family support and support in the community is this really bizarre space. Lorenzo's from Toledo, where he lives now. I'm just sharing from your full board hearing some of the things that brought up. And at the time, it wasn't me. He had actually someone speak on his behalf who he had connected with through poetry 8 years before, but it would also just happen to be somebody who was very well connected in the Cincinnati community. He was the former president of United Way, he was an adjunct faculty member, yada, 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 and really wanted to help him reestablish himself in Cincinnati. They had so many questions about that after they had been told numerous times on record, why do you want him to go to Toledo where we've told you he doesn't have law-abiding family support? He has these support mechanisms in place, right, in Cincinnati. He has a halfway house, he has employment, like he had employment set up for him. And yet they were still kind of warped up around this, well, he's from Toledo, why would we relocate? I brought up all kinds of research, of course, too, around gang stuff and why relocation is actually a good thing if you don't want people to get back into all of the harmful elements of the gang stuff. And none of it just seemed to matter because they were just trying to check these boxes that aren't used the same by every member on the board either.
And I don't want to interrupt you, but I do
No, I
want
think
to
it should be
say
more of a conversation.
that we ran into the exact same thing with Tyler Patterson.
Yeah.
Again, another person who luckily did get out on an innocence claim, but I agree with you, like this rarely happens. Rarely, because they're like, if you're not going to take responsibility for your crime, we are not going to let you out. But the same thing, We had all these supports in Cincinnati, we had a job, we had housing, we had mentors. Oh, and by the way, the parole board made a huge deal about how she had too many mentors.
Yeah.
And why does she need so many? And what about all the other people who don't have any?
Or if they ask you about your job and your aspirations are bigger than what they expect you to be, they'll say, oh, you're motivated.
Oh, yeah, there's.
Yeah. It goes on and on in terms of trying to figure out really what they're looking for, and really what they're, I got asked numerous times about Lorenzo's. Now, mind you, they told you people in prison don't have access to their own institutional summary reports.
And they're not in the open board hearings. Like, our audience might not even know.
Oh, yeah, full
So,
board hearings.
I just wanted to
They,
So Lorenzo doesn't know what
Right.
happened in his hearing except for what he's been told.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to explain that to you because I don't know if everybody in this audience has experience with anything about the parole board, but it's not like you see on TV, especially Ohio's parole board. It's not where you go sit in front of 3 people and then they stamp denied or approved. In Ohio, you have to see an institutional parole board, which is video conference. So there's probably like 3 members of the parole board there. And from there, all 3 of them parole members have to agree to give you a central office board review. And the central office board review is the majority of the parole board. So 7 or more members of the parole board have to be present, and then a majority of them have to. So if there's 7 members of the parole board, there at least 4 of them have to agree to give you a full board hearing. And then at the full board hearing, that's when all the members of the parole board are there, the victim side and the family side, or the lawyer, or whatever. And then that's where they make the decision whether they give you parole or not. So it took me 5 parole hearings before I finally made it to a full board hearing. When you make it to a full board hearing, you have a pretty good chance of getting a parole. And if you've been locked up 25, 30 years and you get a full board hearing, you're expecting to get a parole, your hopes are high. And sometimes you don't get a parole. I mean, and that's devastating to somebody. They've been waiting 25 years to get a full board hearing, that final stage, and then they go there and they're denied again. I've seen people get 5 years after the full board hearing.
The other thing that happens at the full board hearing is anybody who's speaking on behalf of the incarcerated person, they only allow 3 people to speak, max.
Versus the other side.
You can have 20
Yeah.
people on the other side speak out against them. Plus, like I said, you can have letters written against their release that you never see. There's a gentleman in Ohio who has made it his mission to stop parolees from getting parole. And, yes, and he's got a website, Block Parole. And so he does petitions. He just puts petitions out there. He puts all this information out there, and it's all one-sided. And of course, it has nothing at all to do with what's happened since their incarceration. He's never met with any of these people. And he also goes after prosecutors and judges, trying to get them to speak out against.
And they go through every step to try to find somebody from the victim's side to testify against you. So I've seen people get denied parole because their victim's great-grandchild came and testified, who wasn't even alive when the crime was committed. Because don't get me wrong, I think a victim should have a right to testify and give their opinion, but I don't think the decision should be based solely on the victim's testimony. And 9 times out of 10, there have been victims that say, hey, I think that he should be released, or she should be released to society. But the majority are going to say, no, don't let them out. And what does somebody who wasn't even alive at the time of the crime have to do with whether you get released or not?
The other thing is I don't think OBS is doing their job in terms of providing victims' families with even that picture, because they do, by the way, have access to these institutional summaries and all this information about like what the offender's been doing since they've been incarcerated. And instead, you could tell, even in the ones I observed that I didn't participate in directly, that even the questions asked of the family members are all about this initial horrific thing. Remember, the people going in front of this most have taken someone's life, or they have violently assaulted somebody, okay? So these aren't, they've harmed families significantly, right? But the way in which they ask the questions of the family members, a lot of times they participate by phone because they don't want to, they don't, and especially if they're not local, they hold them in Columbus and it's from all over the state. Remember, violence actually occurs usually in the same communities, usually between people who know one another, and so they don't get to speak to that. And in fact, the one I observed of the woman who was, of course, distraught, her daughter was killed, but they just kept asking about the impact of that, okay, of that horrific thing. And anytime she tried to talk about, she's good friends with the offender's mother, they're from the same neighborhood, they just would shut it down. They would say, well, hold on a second, we have someone from OBS, and then they would ask. And we had OBS come to a closing ceremony, and then I knew what we were up against when this person presented all victims as people who never recover. And I, of course, had to put myself out there as a victim of violent crime and say that is an absolutely ludicrous assumption that you're making you just sat there and said we can't put all offenders in the same box. To suggest that victims or victims' families can't heal is ridiculous, actually, because we have victims groups who are adamantly opposed to these parole processes and executing offenders and so forth. But I bring that up because I think that what's going on is this justification is actually being used in a lot of ways, I think, to harm victims and their families and in their communities. Because they're not, a lot of times these cases aren't strangers.
Yeah, so I had a clemency hearing, which is different, but it kind of goes through a similar process on Monday. And the family members kept saying over and over again, if she had just written a letter to my mom to apologize, we could get past this. If she just apologized, she's never apologized. My client has written 3 letters, but she can't send them to the family. They have to go to victim services. Well, victim services will not release the letters unless the family contacts them and says,
for that specific information, yes.
We'll allow that or letters to be received. And so victim services knows they have these letters, but they won't release them.
And instead of even calling the victims themselves and saying, hey, we have these letters, they expect the families to somehow know this bureaucratic system to say, oh, maybe they have something for me. And they put the onus on them to call and ask for it.
And I had another one where the victim wanted to reach out, see, talk to, meet the person in prison, and victim services refused to allow that. And the parole board blocked that as well. So that is part of the parole now, and they are not allowed to meet, talk, or anything.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Because we've actually focused some projects around that issue too, trying to bring more spaces of mediation for victims and restorative justice processes. And because there's groups actually that are really involved in that work and victims and their families who want to participate. And the roadblocks are always the system that supposedly is doing all of this in the name of victims are the ones that are actually, that's what I pretty much told the director of OBS, the ones that are actually impeding the ability to heal. Right? If you're not allowing people who are asking to be in a therapeutic space with the person who harmed their loved one and their family, and you're providing the block, right, to that ability, I could argue that you're the harmful one, not the offender that you won't let out.
And the fact of the matter is that the majority of people who are serving life sentences, as long as they're not natural life sentences, they are going to get released on parole eventually. So it begs the question, is our system really about rehabilitation or punishment? Because wouldn't you rather somebody get out of prison while they have enough life left in them to be a valuable member of society who can contribute to society, rather than let them out when they're in hospice or have to collect government assistance it makes no sense to me.
Then we also have to remember those that at the beginning, when they're in the court system, where they're told, well, if you don't plead guilty, you're gonna get a 50-year sentence. And like I did, I pled guilty to something I didn't do. I did something, just not the conviction, and they said, I guarantee you're gonna be out after 4 years, 8 months, 21 days. I still remember that to a T, and the prosecutor told me that. That was in Cuyahoga County.
Yeah.
And he got booted from the office, so his own party didn't support him because of a lot of corruption in his office. We're working on one guy right now that we're trying to get that county to review his case. We know as a fact he's innocent, but there's a lot of people like that that didn't get the chance or fair process that again.
And a lot of the lawyers though aren't to blame for it because the parole board is so wishy-washy that you don't know, like, okay, when I got sentenced in '93, a lot of people that were sentenced to 15 to life were going up for parole the first time, doing 10 years, 6 months, and getting paroles. Well,
The 2/3.
10 years later, you were averaging 25 years on a 15 to life sentence. So, I mean, and who knows what it'll be 10 years from now.
Yeah, he didn't get out before 2009.
Yeah.
I mean, statistically, yeah, it's really bad.
And then, the other piece of that too isn't just like, why do they keep increasing the membership on the board? Now we're at 12.
Well, actually, now we're at 9 today.
Yeah, because of.
Yes.
But I mean, statute, like, by policy, they can now have 12 members making over $100,000 a year for their responsibilities. And, at one point, we had 5, 7, 9. It's like, why are we getting larger with more? Remember, you have to have the majority votes. And it's mainly because they have so many hearings that they have to hold because they're not letting people out.
Why does the same body have to go 4 times to let me out once?
They need to also cut the term limits down to 2 or 3 years instead of 2 6-year terms. And I mean, there was no better on Margaret G, Capots, or any of them. And Cynthia Mauser to me was probably the worst. And how they say they don't judge, Margaret G, no matter, depending on the case, she'd go and say, well, she'll do something obscene and say, you won't get any more of this, you're doing life. And I mean, really obscene. So.
And when the legislature made these indefinite sentences of 15 to life, the presumption was that at 15 years, you would be evaluated, and if you have had a good good institutional record, if you haven't done any, then you would be released. And so my view is that the parole board is making sentencing decisions that they shouldn't be making.
Totally.
Well, because I know they did a survey of a certain amount of judges throughout the state of Ohio not too long ago, and I think like over 70% of them said that when they sentence somebody to a 15-year to life sentence, or they plan on them to do the minimum sentence unless their institutional behavior dictates otherwise. But so that shows you that the parole board is playing judge and jury.
We talked to several judges too, myself and Victoria, Franklin County. They expect them to be out the first year as long as the conduct, deserves it.
Well, we need to educate the judges then.
Yeah.
Do people have questions? I'm interested if there's things the audience wants to know more about, or if there are things that maybe you don't even understand fully about the parole process because it's really confusing. Even for
Design to be that way.
It's very convoluted, So I just wanted to take a minute. I mean, we have lots of things we could continue to talk about up here, but I wanted to take a minute. Yeah.
I have a question that this is all really probably over my head. I'm really hearing as much as I can and absorbing. So the question I have is, I'm hearing a lot of things that are wrong and corrupt and totally crazy. And what are you seeing that can be done, that really has a possibility of being done? What possible course of action, or who's involved with that course of action. And if there's any other states that you see that are taking a direction that is worth
Yes.
considering.
Yeah, other states are doing, there are some states who are just as bad as us, but there are some states who are doing it really well. And there has to be legislative reform. There has to be changes in the law. That it can't just be the parole board doing whatever they want and making their own rules.
And who would be over them to then make that decision? It's all about legislation, and that would change that?
Most of it.
God.
Yeah, that's what's interesting, because the governor technically is over them, but really,
The director of DRC is the one who appoints them.
Department.
but technically, the governor, but they go with whatever they say. I mean, technically, it's a governor's responsibility, even the release mechanism. But they're gonna go with, just like in courts, right, they go with whatever the probation officers are saying at intake, they're going with those recommendations. But there should be an oversight of their decisions, which is why I think you hear folks bringing up an appeal process, so that you could get access to this information that they use that no one, not even the person who it's written about. And we have a guy in my think tank, you guys, that got an attorney finally, and he's going through a clemency. Clemency becomes this other process to try to basically appeal continual flops, right? But he got an attorney just to get his ISR, to get his institutional summary. And this is what we've been arguing for a while, is how accurate are even the ISRs, right? The information that staff write about, right? So listen, so he found all these inaccuracies, and now his attorney, though, had to go, of course, they had to pay more money, for him to go and fight them with this system for them to correct all these inaccuracies in his institutional record. Go ahead.
I just know with my experience in incarcerated and stuff, you have case managers who are responsible for, these ISRs. They're supposed to call you in to ask you what are you doing? And I literally did 7 years, and I promise you, I was in a case manager's office twice. Once when I was getting transferred from Ohio Reformatory from Women to Dayton Correctional, and my case manager was trying to know what I had done since I'd been over W, and I was like, what do you mean? I did cash, I made everything, I did every group that you guys have had here, now I'm going to BCI.
Yeah.
Then probably 2 months before my judicial release court date, finally, Mr. Kirkpatrick, he calls me in there and he's like, what have you done since you've been here? And I was like, I've graduated twice. It was just at graduation I did a speech. I do all kinds of stuff. So write what you want to write. I'm not going to tell you what's right.
Yeah.
When they should have already been doing that. I think that's a lot of the reasons why it's so hard for so people are incarcerated to get their ISRs, because there's not one because they haven't
done it, and they have high case loads.
Yeah, and the other thing that, just to add another thing to this is, a lot of lifers aren't allowed to take certain programs, to do certain education programs, to do these kinds of things that are gonna help them and help them pass the time, for one thing. And, but then when they go to front of the parole board, they're expected to have had all this stuff, so.
In a phone call, one of the things that was going around trying to figure out this parole board, right? The system created these reintegration dorms or places, right? Now, of course, they're gonna go away. The system tinkers, again, reform, and then kind of goes back to what it is. Well, they basically at one point were saying you need to be in one of these reintegration dorms for 6 months prior to release on a parole, right? So think about this, you're somebody who's been flogged numerous times. If you're somebody, and these are the folks I'm talking about, these are restored citizens who are being proactive, right? They're not in every prison. So you gotta get yourself transferred, right? Because you're thinking, well, I got a better chance, right? If I go get myself transferred now over to SCI Lancaster, they got a reintegration dorm, I'll go in there. And then I'm on the phone, and they're like, no, tell them not to do that because we send them there. Well, what is the difference if you're sending them there You know what I mean? Or if I'm taking it, doesn't that actually show something that they're taking the initiative to go to this space? Which, by the way,
Luckily, in my case, I got a head start. I jumped the gun. So I was in the reintegration unit for like 2 years before I saw the pro work, because I already knew that's what they were going to say. So I figured I'd get one step ahead of them. And when I went up for my parole hearing, they asked about reintegration, and was like, well, he's been in one for 2 years, so they couldn't do that before.
but think about this in terms of the system being designed to fail. If you are at a prison where you've done a lot of time, right, you kind of figure out of that environment, right? And now I ask you to go to another prison for 6 months. And if you don't know how prisons work, the even prisons will tell you this. I mean, you're going to a brand new spot, you gotta establish that you're not gonna be taken advantage of, right? Which makes you more likely to get rule infraction tickets, which is again gonna be a reason for the parole board to not let you out, even though they're the ones who sent you to needed to go to one of these 4 prisons that have a reintegration door.
Or you don't have the respect from the officers at the new prison that you want to, and they could set you up, because they do. Just like police out here in the community set you up, they do it in prison. It's probably even worse.
And the first month, while they're trying to establish what programs you should be in, you're not allowed to do anything. You're not allowed to even have a book to read.
Yeah.
So you can't participate in any programs. You're expected to just sit there.
I want to clarify and expand upon something. I earned my parole this time around, right, on my 12th term, right? The same reintegration units they want you to go to before you get out are ran by inmates, right? And I'm not trying to say that they're not capable of doing that, but let me give you an example. Last year, they asked me to facilitate a program using material from 1994, an alcohol and drug program, right? Statistics that were so wrong now that it was unbelievable. And I refused to do it because they gave me 1994 material, right? Angela herself has put up-to-date material in these units, and they're paper airplanes now.
Yep, they basically, because they buy these curriculums, right, from these, I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, it's this self-fulfilling economic monster, right? And we actually sent a ton of interns to reintegration dorm to do this, right? Students to update, Money Smart, Thinking for a Change, did all this great work and presented it to them to be able to incorporate. And then for DRC to be like, we have a contract for this curriculum that's from 1994 that we got to keep using. So thanks for the work. She had her hand up, I think.
We'll take a cue. I'll keep
Yeah.
saying. So Milo,
I have a question for the person who's doing the proposal. I just heard a little bit of it, the foundation of your argument, I guess, is that it's costing taxpayers money to keep people in?
That's part of it, but we want a fair and transparent parole process, where they have you'll get the right people, which will give the majority of the people that should be home already. They'll give an appeal process that they have not had in the past. I think it's now, if you're going to appeal, you got to have something new that was never presented to the parole board, which really is unfair. And then the prosecutor can come every single time and talk against you. I mean, all that stuff is really not fair, especially the longer you've been down. I mean, people change, but the nature of offense don't. And we have a broken system from the top all the way down and then all the way up. And we have mental abuse, physical abuse. Right now, we have a CO at Dayton that's forcing women into sexual acts. We've gotten several complaints on that.
Yeah, so what?
Sexual acts.
No,
correction officer. And we
their chaplain just was
convicted.
Yes.
I have to get ready to go, but I'm wondering, this is very educational. Thank you for being here.
Milo's the director of this.
Well, what can we do? What do you need as average citizens to do?
I think these two, first of all, I think somebody should say something about the ballot initiative before everybody leaves, because that's a huge one to try to keep people out, and you have the materials.
Yes, so there's information back there, and if you're interested in learning more about it, getting involved in it, I have additional information I can give you. But right now it's signature collection stage to get on the ballot, and it's to provide treatment for drug offenders instead of putting them in jail or prisons. So, and it'll reduce our prison population.
Yeah. And then I would think that you want somebody to get involved with your legislative.
Yes,
So.
yeah, we have, like, the instructor made some copies that's out there. We need help to promote it at the State House. We're gonna do one this month, then we're gonna wait till probably after the election. But we're gonna start meeting with some of the candidates that most likely are gonna win their seats to try to get their support now, so they have some idea what we're trying to do. But we need people on legislative day. And you feel free to study the proposal. And we have so far 8 meetings set up. I'm afraid to do any more and not be able to show up on it. We have like 30 people on Facebook sign up and 1 person show up,
So I'm wondering though if it would be helpful, because I've seen this like with the violent offender registry that was making its way, and all of us have our own representatives, but if we could create some kind of form letter for folks to use as individual citizens to write our own legislators about some of these changes that are needed before it gets to Assembly Day. I also thought, and that's why I'm looking at OJPC, I thought Stephen had a couple legislators that.
Yes. So we're working on a lot of things, but
So write a legislator.
yeah, we're trying to we're in talks with legislators as well to see if we can get them on board. But and then, like I say, we have filed already 1 case against the parole board for their policies. So we'll see. It's just really hard to sue the parole board because they're so protected.
And real quick though, litigation wise, just another question. I don't know that OJPC and like kind of how they got into this and Tyra became a case, but are they taking, because I know this is happening by members of my think tank, and I know it's happening everywhere. They see a Tyra Pedersen case, and I'm sure now OJPC is getting inundated with letters asking for representation. Is there some kind of long-term plan for the Ohio Justice Policy Center to have to be able to either, I guess it's impossible to staff that, or litigate it?
Yeah, if people want to give us money so we can increase our staff, we can do a lot more work. But Tyra was an unusual case because we don't usually do innocence cases. We leave that to the Ohio Innocence Project that has lots of money. Because we have a very, very small staff and we don't receive funding for our program like Legal does or things like that. We get our money through fundraising and grant writing and donations. So we're very limited in what we can do, and we try to litigate cases even if they're one individual person that will have an impact on many. So we really try to take cases that, so even with my project, I have women that I'm representing for clemency and parole, but the idea is to make a bigger impact on women who are incarcerated for the death of their abuser. Understand the process, they didn't get it, you know.
So we had a few, I had a stack, so there, I don't know your name, but you had your hand up. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a PhD student at the University of Louisville in Urban and Public Affairs, and I'm doing my dissertation research on the impacts of impartial institutions on trust creation and actually creating virtuous cycles within various communities, both between police, actually getting police out of their headquarters and actually into communities to get to know people. That's the number one way to not stereotype another individual. And I had one comment and two questions. The first was that when you were describing the different sort of tricks that the parole board might use. And well, if you have good behavior, clearly you know that's the way this is going to be. This all strikes me very much like the Jonathan Ronson book, The Psychopath Test, in which individuals were needed to prove that they were not insane, which is not possible. And then there's the standard of, well, are you a danger to are you, is this in the people's interest? Well, who are the people? For I think that that's something that they can't simply just go underneath. And are we naive enough to think that crime isn't committed in all neighborhoods? Just frustrates me. Then to the question, you mentioned the economic drivers behind these, the prison industrial complex, and that was something that was brought out beautifully in the Netflix documentary 13th. I served on a panel for that once, and I was asked the question, well, if there is an economic driver behind this, is there any hope for anyone to how do we attack this? So I think it's possible to do it, but I'm curious to hear, I'm not as well versed in this, what are ways in which people can sort of try to hit the economic bottom line of these companies that are actually making money off of these sorts of things, and at least information campaigns about what that is. And I believe it's possible because 20 years ago, if you'd asked someone what a conflict diamond was, they would have not known what we're talking about. But today, it's expected that your diamonds are non-conflict or that your coffee is fair trade. So I think the change is possible, but I don't, where would you start for that?
I think people who are interested in economics, you got to get them with economics, and I think that's what Jim's trying to do here. Jim. Okay. He's trying to hit the people who care about the economy to say, wait, this doesn't make sense. It makes more sense to reduce the population, and we can do that safely, and we can do it. And the other thing is, just generally speaking, vote. Vote out the people who are making these bad decisions or who are economically tied to these problems.
To the failure of the systems that they're running.
Right.
Yeah.
And vote in people who.
I definitely think that's a step, and I also think that too, people could, if we were speaking out in a systematic way, that you can start to demand, for instance, as taxpayers, that DRC maybe be judged for how well they produce law-abiding, tax-contributing members of our society, rather than getting more money when they bring them back to prison, right? So changing the funding formula of how they get money. Now, the co-op, the business sector that's in these prisons, when you're making, right, we were just talking about this actually earlier. Some jobs you can make, a little bit more state pay, but, it's slave labor.
They make your license plates in Ohio.
Yeah.
And,
if you're lucky, you make $9 a month.
You ever hear the saying?
And then you have to pay for everything.
Takes village to raise a child. Put more emphasis on community-based initiatives. Maybe it's time for the community to stand up and show the federal government how it's done. Who would be more invested in their own interest in the community you live in?
And if you could get companies to hire these people
Right.
upon the release, a lot of people don't realize inmates make a lot of stuff for Walmart through slave labor is what I call it, but Walmart will not hire anybody that's got a record. But they have having them make it.
They're profiting off of prison labor, though. Sure. I mean, there's a lot of folks that are profiting. In fact, there's just been a recent report. There is getting more transparency, right? And there is a recent report that I can share with, if there's some kind of listserv here, that actually outs all of the industry making money federally on all prisons. And so part of it's getting to the transparency level of who is like the big capitalist in the prison game. And there are watchdog groups that are now starting to expose all of them. Okay. Now, it's about doing something with that information, right? Maybe stopping shopping at Walmart right? Or
Yeah.
stopping, contributing to, your stock portfolio and companies that are profiting off of slave labor.
And the other thing is to, instead of boycotting Walmart, that's one whole action thing. The other is to find out who is hiring.
Yes, and
give them
support
our
them.
Community and support.
Yes.
And I don't know of a single industry that supports people on parole or people that are out.
There are certain ones, but it's
Skilled
hard to
labor.
find, like, yes, most skilled laborers are welding companies, there's certain ones, I know there's one in Cincinnati, when I got out, there's a welding company that only hires ex-felons.
Well, that would be interesting to me, to know where are those and to have letters of
Well,
support.
you can Google like companies that hire felons and I mean, the list is short, I mean, it's probably 1 or 2 pages, but I mean, there's a lot of places that do hire felons, but there's only like a handful of ones that will announce it, like, yeah, we do hire.
That'll be public.
Will be public.
There's some good bread.
There's some other things
Yeah.
too, like they may hire convicted felons for a low-level entry position, but they're not allowed to move up in the company and hold a management position.
Yeah.
So there's those, just as a caveat to this.
I know Terry it's your name, right? Terry, you had your hand up.
Yeah, back to the, meeting with the parole board. I asked Andre at one point, how can witnesses or victims come in 20, 30 years later and have new evidence?
They can't.
They can't.
Right.
But they can.
But they do, but they can't, right? Like, they don't have new evidence, they just.
And I said, well, how? Because in the case that I'm working on, no, I'm not a lawyer or anything, but I'm going to Cuyahoga County next week to present someone that's been in 30 years and has been innocent for 30 years fighting his case. And so they're allowed, the Supreme Court allows prosecutors, judges, police, whatever, to say whatever they want because they can't be prosecuted.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not lying.
Yeah.
But it's unbelievably lying. This prosecutor came in and said he'd been given a parole. After 20 years, he'd been given a parole. His sentence is only 15 to life. He was flopped 10 years and then 20 years, another 10 years. He says some of the most outrageous, the prosecutor. He wasn't even part of the one that tried the case.
Yeah.
Right.
Some of the most outrageous things that weren't possibly true. And I said, how can they do that? He said, your legislator lets them. They're allowed to come up regardless with additional information.
Well, like I said, if you can prove that that information is false, then there is the Keith case that they're not supposed to rely on that and they need to fix that in the record.
And like I said, so you guys pulled his parole, gave him 2 more years. Why didn't somebody research that?
And see if they just took it at face value.
Yeah, so why didn't you look into his case? He said 90% of the people who come to us don't have cases. And we can't look at all of the cases. They tried to appeal it, they tried everything, and it's just like blinders. And you have that, it's so wrong. And that's part of where the problem is. You gotta start with legislators to get them to stop the stupid stuff in order to stop the parole.
One question, I'll do actually, I want to see it, but, so what would someone have to do to kind of like get, well, it's all really about DRC's policies, because in order to even like get the institutional parole hearing, you have to abide by the rules. So when will DRC or Gary Moore or whoever the hell the powers to be are aware that allowing people with lengthy sentences to actually participate in educational programs, and they matter. Like I facilitated probably like 12 groups a week that had 6 to 8 runs and got it from Emily all her copies and all her books that she got, because they wanted the inmates to do this, take this initiative and do this stuff, but they didn't have supply. Like, we should have supplies, bro. Like, they didn't want to give us the supplies to like allow these women to like do this stuff. And then when it came down, they completed it. So like it goes into the computer as like it wasn't actually as a completed class, it was like some new shit they made up for the reintegration thing. It's called something like you get it and it's like a completion, but it wasn't like a certificate.
Oh.
You know what I'm talking about? I can't think of it. I've been out from this.
It's not
accredited stuff. Okay, so then like the women complete these programs and get this and the stuff's on the computer, but at the end of the day, it's not even being like used as part of their ISR, right? Where it's part of showing that they actually participated and completed an educational program because it was inmate ran, but this is what DRC does. You guys don't want to pay nobody no more money because you guys keep taking everybody's money. So then what you want us to do is just come up with these groups. Like I probably read more books in prison than I have in my whole life. Did like my own research, came to Emily like, hey, I think this is the way that we can implement core values and kind of like get people on the right way to this, do that. I do all this work, do all these programs, these women do these 6 to 8 week programs, they do this accreditation thing, but then they can't even bring this shit to the parole board. It's like, this is what I did. So like, what do people like myself who's very passionate about, what can I do besides writing a legislator or calling them on or waiting for them to come in the parking lot like a crazy person I am? Like, what can I do to get Gary more? I mean, I'm dangerous. What can I do to get Gary more to see, like, until we can all be on the same page as, like, what, like, is important, which is education, because that's, like, what ultimately is in life, and, like, making people aware of the issues, and, like, how can we get them to kind of be like, okay, you know what, these groups kind of count for people to only make these sentences, like, what is that going to entail? So
I think actually one of the things we did with Inside Out that I was initially kind of like, ugh, like there's parts of me that's like, oh, okay, I'm co-op, right? I'm co-oping in a lot of ways. But you go into what their language is, right? So like with Inside Out, we applied, I think it was last year or year before, as a state for all Inside Out classes to be counted as what they call reentry approved accredited programs, right? So that it did go in the file as a box instead of what we knew was happening, which was now. I will say, and there's some of the legislations trying to address this as well. One of the things that they now have disentangled again, that's like this together and then it's apart, is the good days. Mm-hmm. So the good days got disentangled from the reentry accrued. So like Inside Out, for instance, you cannot, it's not tied to earned credit. Yeah. It's a reentry accrued program, so it goes in exactly what you're talking about, this formal packet that they need, but it doesn't give people good days. That has become, this is good days or this back and forth, who can get them, how many days you can get them, and of course it was a way, that's the way in which the 2/3 system worked a lot and worked effectively. You were doing programming, earning time off your sentence, because with the actual fact that education matters, right?
They give you good days. They give you good days. Okay, for example, I was sentenced to 15 to life. With good days, I saw the parole board in 10 years, 6 months my first time because of all my good days that I accumulated. Well, once you see the parole board and they deny you parole, them good days are gone. Time that you've been incarcerated. So I earned 3.5 years of good days. They're gone for no reason. And because now you're not, I haven't heard of it since the early 90s. I haven't heard of anybody getting a parole the first time of a parole. So why are you even giving me good days? Just let me, well now that's under the old law. Now if you're sentenced to 15 to life, you're not going up to parole until you did 15 years. You're not getting any good days. But I mean, yeah.
So I would say though, for the programs you're doing now, and for the
I haven't done any since I've been home because, like, you know, like the same thing, we're going to go through like the processes of like coming in, and you know, they didn't like me from the jump anyway because I was about the right thing and like did a lot of things in there. But like I started seeing things like okay, you make a way for people to kind of like get ahead, and then here comes like 50 hurdles. You know what I'm saying? That you have to like try to jump all at once to just kind of like get through. I was just kind of like wondering, like, has OJPC or anybody thought about, okay, well, maybe if we can work with DRC to maybe start educating people a little bit more, because I think you leave that place with a great basis of education or some kind of form of understanding, that's the foundation for successful reentry. So then when you have women who are only 25 years alive, never even got to like participate in GED or 5 years in the board, so you know, sit around for 20 years and then have to peel potatoes and wash and iron officers' bras and in uniforms, you know what I mean? How is that going to make you, what, like,
Job
what's still,
market.
like, yeah, and like, what college can you get in from there? Or like, what, like, how can you get into a career or technical school from that kind of stuff? Like, I think that's the main thing. And like, that's been my fight from the very beginning, is just trying to like provide someone that they get a real education that really counts on their file, that they can present and say, you know what, even though I had 20, whatever, I did this, and like, this is where I'm going now. And then they have a better plan to present. Yeah, that's your release plan, because at the end of the day, like, you know, Lorenzo, you can say, hey, I've got everything lined up for me in a new place, and they want you to, it's kind of like they build you, they keep you hostage for all those years, kind of keep your mind incapacitated to where you can't grow and flourish and not and provide solution, and then we're going to push you right back where you came from.
Well, I also
Like, it's almost like they build the recidivist system.
Yeah.
Themselves.
And I think we need, as individuals, we can also, right, to get Pell Grants reinstated, because if you look even at recidivism rates in general, when we have prisons getting college degree, people in prison getting college degrees, that was much lower.
Oh, yeah.
And this whole higher ed thing, like inside out, not all the universities, Ohio State now just granted credit for all incarcerated students in any inside out class at Ohio State. We have 6 instructors, but that's not normal. That took me 10 years of a lot of work. Okay, because think about, universities are run like businesses. I know Antioch may not be, but most of them are now. And so when there was Pell Grants available, right? When there were Pell Grants available, they could justify being in those spaces because they're drawing those dollars, right? When they're not drawing any dollars, it dries up. And people are, you know, there's some programs in some places, but I think that's another way that as everyday citizens, we should be involving our, you know, federal and local folks on that. I mean, the Pell family themselves want them reinstated. You know, so I think there are things we can do, and I do think the number one thing is getting civilly engaged. Knowing who our people are, knowing what initiatives we should be talking to them about, right? I mean, you talk about stalking and drive. I think my person thinks I'm electronically stalking them.
Yeah, well, I
Like that group, my person thinks I'm like, what are you doing? You know, and we're organizing. I mean, that is the only thing that matters in a political environment where votes matter, right? And they need to get reelected.
So I guess my next question would be, like, since you work with Gary Warren, like, what is his perception on education? Like,
Well, here's the thing. Gary's leaving.
he has the
Gary's leaving.
Well, and then-
Gary will be at the end of the year. And remember, new governor comes in, new DRC. Now, don't say amen yet.
Well, I mean,
Because you never know what's coming next, right?
I was there for 7 years under his reign. I don't think it can get any worse.
And see, what's interesting is, you know, you gave a brief history of governorships, right? I mean, if you look at the history of, it can get worse.
Yeah.
Trust me, it can.
Maybe it can.
It can only get worse.
So I just wonder, like, what his perception on education was, since he like ultimately has sort of like some kind of power to be like, hey, you know what, we're gonna change this regulation, we're gonna change this, we're gonna start the process. Like, does he not see the?
I don't think he knows what his perception on education is. He talks a real good game. I've talked to him plenty of times when he came in the institution. He's all for making it more transparent parole process. That's what he says. He says he's going to make all these changes he never has.
So I kind of look at Gary Moore as kind of the politician of DRC, right? I mean, he's not, you're making the things happen person.
Okay.
He's the visionary, right? And he says a lot of things to be politically wherever he's at, right? I do agree with him though that some of the things that need change at the front end. That you can, the prison system's this bad, the prison can't say, I'm not taking you. Right? I mean, private prisons can. That's another way we can get involved, is to shut down the 2 private prisons we have in Ohio. Private prisons can, right? They can say, no, you're not coming here because you'll cost us too much money. But the state system can't. So I think that he is right there. And I think he has tried, there are some initiatives I think he has really tried to get behind, like TCAP with a lot of backlash, right? I don't know. I mean, I'm not friends, we don't talk on the phone. I don't really know, like what his real stance is. I was scared when he came in because he came from private.
Yeah.
And I knew kind of his connection fiscally to the prison industrial complex. Again, it's like, but so I don't know who's going to come next, right? With the new governor will come a new director, and then what they can really achieve.
But things can always get worse. I mean, every time I'm like, oh, things can't get worse. I mean, then you're like, oh,
yes, they can.
They did. Look at that. Way worse.
Way worse, especially in prisons. You think, oh, well, it can't be that bad. And then you come out and you're like, oh, yeah, it can actually. And now it can even be worse than what you thought it could be. And you can't even do what you need to do when you're in there. So that's where I spend my efforts, is working with the people who make programming happen, which is at the local prison level, right? Mm-hmm. Those are the folks I'm buying coffee and being nice to, because they're the ones who actually are the gateway to making things happen. And can make things really horrible, quite frankly.
And just so you know, about 6 weeks ago, Emily invited me to come speak to the women at DCI, and I told them a lot of this stuff, and I told them, if you're coming up for a parole, this is what you need to do. This is, you need to get your ducks in a row. And if you're sitting here, even if your parole's a long ways away, you need to be working on getting into education programs, taking these different programs that they have, the parole board has to have, everybody. Building your community, building your support system, whether it's in prison or outside of prison, getting to know people who can write you letters and who can help support you when you get out.
That's another way I think the community should be more involved, is actually going into these prisons to develop support systems, because the fact that people that are incarcerated for 30 or 40 years have to somehow come up with their own support system in the free world that they have no contact with is like this ludicrous thing that they make people do. And so why not create some opportunities to bring more and more support mechanisms, mentorship, things that actually matter to this administrative honor.
Victoria, you had your hand up, I think. Yeah, one of the things that I've been doing to try to reach out to the community is trying to get other organizations to get together and do different types of fundraising. Whether it's a family fundraiser or whatever, to try to raise money for reentry.
Mm-hmm.
And in Columbus, I haven't had a very good outcome with trying to get the community support there. Because everybody goes, you've been in prison, I don't want you in my state, in my town, I don't want you in my immediate vicinity. And it's the stigma of somebody being in prison is what we need to erase from the community. Mm-hmm. Because you can be sitting next to someone on the bus, behind someone at the store, and you don't know what that person has a crime. You don't know that person's background, so how can you find out that person has a background and then say you want to stand 20 feet back from that person in the store just because you don't want to be seen around that person, even if you've done them wrong. So how do I go about getting the community to go together to support these people and make them understand that they can be a law-abiding citizen, a tax-paying citizen, and work jobs and have a grown up? How do I do it?
I think that's like anything, actually, even like when you think about stereotypes, discrimination, prejudice, all of these things, it's like moment by moment. So you literally have to expose to the other, right? That's one thing I really like about Antioch is it brings people together, whatever those spaces are that normally wouldn't come together. And so as I'm interacting with someone who is a restored citizen, and I'm like, wow, you weren't what I thought you would be. And, it kind of just individually starts to shift. around kind of, and then they go and educate their family members and their community about, you know, what we should and shouldn't be doing, and stand up for folks then once you've had a personal experience. Because remember, we've purposely kept incarcerated folks, prisons, and this problem over there, way over there, right? We have very few urban prisons. That's purposeful. And so the more we can bring folks to spaces that they are encountering, and they don't have to be prisons, because there's plenty of places in the community where you would encounter folks that are different than you, right? Homeless shelters. I mean, you could think of any population that we have all of these stigmatized notions about: mental health facilities, addiction treatment facilities, and coming into contact and in a space that's actually productive, I think is what matters.
My boss tells me, I would rather give you a job than have you kick my door in.
Right.
So,
But most of us will.
continuing
They don't see
to,
it as that.
well, the majority of people
Most
know.
companies don't.
They just see the liability.
I have the same problem because, you know, here I am trying to get funding to represent my clients, right? My clients aren't warm and fuzzies. We're not the Innocence Project. We refer to ourselves fondly as the Guilty Project because most of our clients did, if they didn't do what they're accused of, they did something, right? So I have the same concerns, but also like we've set up here today, almost everybody is going to get out of prison at some point. So let's help them be successful when they get out so they don't commit another crime and go back because they have no options. Because we put them out on the street and say, hey, we haven't done anything for you, but go find a job, go find a place to live. And then there's 900 things in Ohio law that prohibit you from getting a job and getting housing. But go be successful. And at some point, a lot of people don't have options and say, you know, I don't know what else to do.
Go find a job thing. 62 years old, you're getting out, go find a job.
Yeah.
See, but even that's crap though, I mean, because I can get somebody I can have Joe Smith send a letter to the parole board, say, hey, I have a job for you. Joe Smith ain't got no job himself. Okay. No, I own Joe Smith construction company. He has a job waiting for him.
And sometimes it's sad that you have to do that.
Right.
Then you have to participate in that, yeah.
I just had a question, like, so what's the length on flops now? Like, are they still allowed to flop people 10 years?
Yes, they're not allowed to, but.
In the way that they do.
And it's so randomized. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason why you get 3 years versus 5 years.
A year later, he gets sent.
I know a woman who's done 43 years, man. I mean, she's been in prison when I've been on earth and has done everything. I mean, she went from driving trash trucks to going downtown cleaning houses back before ORW had fences, to like seeing the whole big transition of privatized prisons, Airmark. I mean, she came in wearing her own clothes. You know what I mean? Like, it's just weird to me. And she's done all these things, roadblocks, been in charge of the dog program since it started, and is 72 years old now and got flopped like 5, I think. So it's just kind of like, are they allowed to do 10 or is like 5 the number now?
Well, and let's talk about, they could actually do more to what we call compassionate releases. You know, I go down to FMC, the medical center, and I have a hard time being in that space, I gotta be completely honest, because, you know, we're training people in prison to be hospice workers. And us as taxpayers, if it's gonna be this economic argument, I don't like this economic argument. I get we have to do it for Republicans, but I think it's a human argument. Why aren't we releasing them, like, to their families to die peacefully? We have terminally ill people who we are spending exorbitant amounts of resources, money, to keep locked up, who are dying, who literally, you know, could not harm anyone.
Let them out, let them have a little bit of life they have, and let them spend it with their
Family.
They understand what they did in the past was wrong. They've been rehabilitated from it. They're too old to refund now. You know, it's like somebody that's in jail for bank robbing when they was 18 years old, that's 73 years old. They're not gonna will out of the bank in a wheelchair.
one of the.
Let them have time with their families.
So one of the problems myself and Victoria's been facing, Representative Adam Miller's been calling us to try to help find housing. They just dropped off a guy in a wheelchair on the corner of the street and said, "You're homeless." I mean, he had no place to go. Lucky he had a little bit of money saved up from retirement that he could stay a week in a apartment. I think he repented now. He didn't really have any options.
Right.
You know, and then we got 2 calls from ladies a couple weeks ago that's homeless. You don't want your sex offenders homeless. You don't want your people down on murder homeless. You want a stable housing, stable employment for them. You know, so they can.
And isn't it the system's job to actually help make that happen? I mean, that's the thing as taxpayers, if that's the taxpayer argument.
Well, they're gonna keep you in prison for 30 years, 30, 40 years and not, not care about what your life is like when you get out. And then when you get out, you spent all this money for 30, 40 years. You can't spend a little bit more money after I get out for the first year or two to make sure I don't be offended.
Yeah.
No, the other aspect of it is I was speaking with someone that works for the homeless hotline in Columbus this morning. And he informed me that they have a list of at least 350 sex offenders that are homeless on the street around the Columbus area right now. Now you figure these people that are homeless, they ride the free bus downtown. These people get on the bus and these people don't know what their history is, don't know what their past is. So why can't the community realize that this person's 43 years old, living on the street? Why can't we give them a small job picking up a car or something like that? Pay them a small minimum wage and take the houses that need to be redone in the area, redo them and put these people in houses for 6 months or a year where they go on their feet and get a regular job and be a part of society. And I don't understand why the OERC doesn't have a program like that. There's no program straight from them for housing.
Part of the problem is the system is very reactive, not proactive. We're not going to put money into things to prevent issues. We're going to put it into things to punish.
Right, but the other aspect of that is you look at how much money they put into these rehabilitation programs for drug offenders, knowing that drug offenders are the #1 cause of recidivism. So why not put more money towards helping get out instead of not helping them with jobs or housing, and they want to turn back to drugs.
Right.
Like women in prostitution. They're living on the street. That's the only way they have a making a living because their background doesn't allow them to get a job. Most temp services won't hire them. They can do all the schooling and everything in prison, but when they get out, they can't get a job doing childcare, they can't get a job working for a school, hospital, or anything. It doesn't make any sense why.
Look, when you have a system in which the local county jails will tell you this, winter hits, they literally let people out, they go to next door to the gas station to steal something in front of somebody because they need sleep, warmth, food. And people see that in the system, there's exposure to it, but it's also a cultural, we're in a capitalist society, and it's a cultural problem about how we view one another. Like, that's your problem. That's not my problem. Right? Like, go to Norway, where they view you harmed somebody, we did something wrong. If you're out harming someone, we as a community failed you. That's a totally different way of looking at harm, right? I mean, we don't, though. It's all about, we train, and people in prison are really good at this one. They are so accountable. They're too accountable, by the way. Because we are all about individual accountability. And it's really actually hard for them to even start looking at structural and beyond. No, I'm responsible because we drill that into all of us, but especially into people in prison. That it's just all, nope, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta do this. There's no support mechanism in place.
Exactly. And even counselors don't teach them to have that support mechanism.
If they have counselors.
Exactly. That's the other end.
Yeah.
They don't get the care that they need later.
Yeah.
They don't get the medical care, they don't get the mental health care. How do they expect them to get it when they get out if they're not getting it on the inside?
They need pieces in place when they get out.
Exactly.
As you see this opiate crisis boom, you also see the treatment crisis boom.
Exactly.
It's all about the almighty dollar, right? I'm not suggesting that treatment don't help, right? But how many times does someone have to go to treatment for it to work? What's the average? Does anybody know?
3 to 4 times
Right.
before it actually takes effect. But the other aspect of it is the treatment that they're giving them for the opioids, most of it is counseling. They're not going in and saying, okay, let's try it. This person's been down 4 times.
They don't have the pieces in place. They don't have
a system of care in place. Yeah, now with the everybody paying attention to the opioids, what if I'm addicted to crack?
Right.
I can't get in any, I'm not kidding. You're addicted to meth, crack. Like you're almost better off coming in positive for an opioid right now, or heroin, any other drug, because you're not gonna get, they're only getting funding for the heroin and
They'll
opioid.
tell you, go put some heroin in your system.
Yeah, and then we'll let you in.
They teach you cognitive skills, role playing, and all that terrific stuff, right? But when you get out, the pieces are not in place. You ain't got nothing to fight for.
Yeah.
That's why one of the things that me and James talk about all the time is starting a program to go in and start a mentoring program in the prison before they're released.
Yeah.
And not
Mike Davis asked
parts in
us.
place is one of the things that I'd like to see.
And I'd like to see more than just people who are interested in these issues for all sorts of reasons doing that. Like, I would like to see community and business involvement in that model.
Right, exactly.
I just wanted to say that it is a little bit after 3, so I wanted to just honor people's time. I know people have like family engagements and things that they have to get to, but I wanted to thank a lot of people have like trickled out. But thank you all for coming, and thank you so much, all of you for coming. I guess, some people left, and I can kind of post this in places where I posted the announcements for this, but if people want to be, like, I can create some kind of email list thing for people who want to stay connected somehow, and I'll figure out how to do that. So, but thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
I guess that's it. So we recorded this. I just wanted to say quickly, so we have some friends at Dayton Correctional who we've been working with who are serving life. Hi, friends. We're going to bring this back. And say hi.
Yeah,
we can say
I'm
hi.
bringing it to SCI, so I have to
Is it on YouTube?
I'm not well, I know you guys, you guys live streamed it. But, so we have this recording. If you want copies or you want access to it, we can figure out now that we have it, how to get it to folks. So maybe we could use the States of Incarceration website too as a clearinghouse for some of these things, because we have our own page there. But we're happy to share all of these. So thank you, and thank you.
Thank you.
So Chris, I need you to fill out a form, and then give you your. I have a site. I think figure out
But I know this is
and she's so it's not far.
okay.
Great to meet you.
Hey, Victoria.
I
have her.
Oh, you're leaving. Yes, so good to see you. So I sent a good report back to the powers to be.
Hey, Victoria.
I'm not participating. Did you get the?
Oh, there's one here.
Did she have this? I
This is a gas.
Let me give you a band-aid, you can talk, Mom.
Yes, we'll be in touch because I was actually going to contact Ed too about something that I want to work on.
Well, Ed Ryan he's been he's with the Ravina Institute, and he's trying to help us too with this project. It's just, we're also doing this big thing at OSU to bring all the police together.
I want to really do a big project in this work because they're,
It's to expose their. I definitely think that. Well, which is why I'm including women in everything, and I definitely think there's a racial.
Yeah, I think we
element.
Yeah, but it's going to take a lot of manpower.
That's what we're trying to get through this IRB process because.
The criminal justice House and Senate.
It didn't.
Yes, it lists the polls that they did, and
so that's where we can, and that's public record, because I have the hardest time getting, of course, any information.
The support doesn't just list the like I got the first one for 2017, I think. But it doesn't list who didn't get it, but it lists who got it. Good information.
And that's on the website? No, it's something.
But we have to request it from either the parole board or the.
Each time they do it.
Or the.
The other thing we're trying to do is create a chapter, there's an ORW lifers. Is where the lifers group is, and so we're trying to kind of mobilize also within the prison in ways that aren't threatening prison work by creating chapters of lifers so that they can go around because most of them are dealing with this. And the prison system is kind of designed to support prison-based groups. And so I just reached out, there's a woman, Alice, Circuit is which is unbelievable. But I just reached out to their staff people to say, kind of to go through the formal process so that we can get a chapter at DCI, like places where we know we have these. The way they keep them, they spread them out through Ohio to the prison comms.
Right.
They do, and that's what this is an official chapter organized. They get money, they can actually